Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Let the filibustering begin.
Welcome to Nerd Party.
Hello and welcome to Filibuster here on the Nerd Party Network, home to so many amazing shows from Nerd Nuptial on a Monday all the way through to Missing Frames on a Sunday, and so many great shows in between, from things like Great Shot Kid, Aggressive Negotiations, Owlpost, so many shows. It's just incredible, really. I'm Lee Hutchison, and I'm joined in the Batcave today by Dallas. How are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
Yeah, I'm pretty good. I'm pretty excited about this one. Like anyone who's been on sort of social media the past few days will have noticed the excitement, the coverage, the think pieces, looking at its history and marking the 10th anniversary of an iconic movie. Of course, we're going to be chatting today about Mamma Mia. Ha 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 ha.
Hey, I've just seen the sequel. You know, I'm good to go if you want to do that.
Yeah, I have literally just seen it as well. But obviously, this episode is kind of dropping on July 24th, 2018, the 10th anniversary of The Dark Knight. So we're going to talk about that today, its legacy and kind of our memories of that kind of time all the way back 10 years ago when we were much younger and probably had more hair on our head. But kind of obviously we both mentioned we have both just seen sort of Mamma Mia 2. I always like to know what you've been watching sort of in the time that we've been podcasting. So what have you been seeing the past week or so at the cinema, Dallas?
Well, I've only managed to see a couple of films at the cinema this week. One was Mamma Mia 2, Here We Go Again, and the other one was Hotel Artemis.
I've seen Mamma Mia 2, but I've not seen Hotel Artemis yet. I saw Mamma Mia 2, I saw Skyscraper, which you'd seen the previous week, and I saw Leave No Trace as well. So yeah, it was a pretty diverse weekend for sure. So Mamma Mia 2 was a movie I had zero expectations for based on the trailers, and then this weird buzz in the past few weeks seemed to be that the film is actually really good or great, and oh my god, it's evoking so much emotional responses from people I trust. Where did you fall on the Mamma Mia 2, Mamma Mia Here We Go Again ! Divide?
Well, if we're talking about legacy, I mean, Mamma Mia is a film which I have a long storied history with, and the fact that we played it at the Belmont Filmhouse up in Aberdeen for 6 months straight after its release. It basically played every weekend. We would have sing-along shows and all that sort of thing. So I couldn't get rid of the film for 6 months, so I never really wanted to see it again. But then, you know, I was going to go and see this one because, you know, I try to see as much as I can anyway, but also, you know, it felt like it was going to make a good review regardless of, you know, whether it was any good or not. So, but I mean, it is incredibly flawed. This film screws its timeline in 2 films harder than the MCU has managed to do over 20 or whatever. I mean, it is absolutely ridiculous that, I mean, this is a film where the screenwriters have clearly, I don't think they actually went back and watched the original film, because there's so many plot holes and discrepancies and stuff, it just doesn't make any sense. However, it's really difficult not to just let it all wash over you and find yourself enjoying it regardless of its many, many flaws. And basically the whole thing eventually takes up a whole new gear with the arrival of Cher, who I think I told my wife, I was trying to explain it in that, have you ever been to karaoke with your friends and you're all just having a laugh and just joking around, and then one person gets up and takes it so seriously and just does it so well that you wondered why you even bothered showing up? That's what Cher does to the rest of the cast in Mamma Mia. She shows you how it should be done. And yeah, I mean, I shouldn't have liked it, but yeah, I enjoyed it. What can I say?
Yeah, exactly. It seems to be kind of, you know, getting quite a huge reaction, and I could barely remember the first one. I've only ever seen it one time, and then when I went to see it, like, you know, I came out and I'd not read any reviews or anything like that. I'd just seen sort of the buzz, and then all these people saying, oh, the timeline was messed up, and I couldn't remember the timeline at all. So when I think there was an AV Club article which detailed the many inaccuracies of the movie, and I was like, fair play to kind of nosediving that badly in terms of like remembering what happened in one previous movie where all you had to do was keep hold of that one timeline. It was quite impressive, really.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was noticeable to me, and I hadn't seen the film in 10 years. I went back, and it's like Amanda Seyfried's character in the first film is explicitly said that she is 20 years old. So going by that, 10 years later, she'd be 30 years old. However, the film goes back in time to when the Meryl Streep's younger version of herself meets the men who she sleeps with and then isn't sure which one's the father. And that's back in 1979, which would have made Amanda Seyfried 38 years old. And yeah, I mean, it just goes on from there. And yeah, it doesn't make any sense, but it's the kind of film that's critic proof, and doesn't matter if it doesn't make sense. Who knows? They're just wanting to have a good time. But I mean, I think the biggest problem was that they never really expected to have a sequel. Therefore, they cherry picked most of the good songs for the first one, and it's basically sort of playing the game of how are they going to shoehorn in the songs this time round. And oh, what a surprise! There was a character called Fernando in it.
Yeah, exactly. Like I remember, like I couldn't remember much of any of the songs used in the first one, but I naturally assumed, well, they're gonna have used the big hitters. And then I think it was like "Kiss the Teacher" was like probably the first number in the film. I was like, yeah, this is like the deep dive. And I imagine like this film, if you're a fan of ABBA, is probably going to be the movie that you kind of maybe even love more than the second one, because it's like, yeah, everyone knows "Dance Queen," everyone knows, "Mamma Mia," whatever. Like this stuff, like "Kiss the Teacher," this is like the really good tracks. This is like the obtuse ones that they're not the trendy ones, the all popular ones. So I imagine there'll be quite a kick for those kind of fans.
Yeah, no, I had a big problem with the song "Kiss the Teacher" because is it basically sort of implying that she's had a sexual relationship with a teacher? Because I mean, these days that is a big deal, and someone's going to lose their job or go to prison. So throwing that kind of slander around these days is very, very dangerous.
Absolutely. Simpler times, eh?
Yeah.
So, kind of looking back at simpler times, 2008.
Yes, the other big film of 2008.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to pull you up. You did say it was 10 years since you've last seen it. Like, you've even lost track of your own Dallas history here. Surely it's 9 years, 6 months after your 6-month ordeal with Mamma Mia.
I suppose, yes, actually, yeah. No, yeah.
See, now we're looking at the Mamma Mia writers with perhaps a bit more of a sympathetic ear.
Yes.
So kind of 2008, a simpler time. Barack Obama was about to be elected President of the United States of America. And for film fans and nerds and geeks, the second coming of Christ arrived in the form of The Dark Knight. And, as I said, everyone was having their think pieces out last week. Oh, it's the 10th anniversary. I will acknowledge it only on July 24th of the UK experience. So kind of looking back all the way in 2008 and somewhat even a little bit before that, what was your kind of expectations sort of going into The Dark Knight? We had like such a really good trailer campaign. We had a cliffhanger at the end of Batman Begins, and we had like Heath Ledger as the Joker, which people paint like, whenever there seems to be a divide between someone being cast in any movie, going, well, look back at Heath Ledger, everyone hated him and look how that turned out. I remember being very excited for Heath Ledger personally, so I will denounce that. But what was your experience going in and kind of building up to that time?
I mean, the whole sort of the Heath Ledger casting sort of thing, I think clearly none of these people had probably seen Brokeback Mountain or anything really other than maybe like 10 Things I Hate About You and A Knight's Tale perhaps. But I mean, I guess that was when the whole sort of in Nolan we trust sort of thing came about, where he can cast anyone. Because I mean, I know like Anne Hathaway came in for a lot of stick in The Dark Knight Rises as well, but he proved like within one scene that he knows how to cast a movie. And I mean, Batman Begins for me was fantastic. I thought it was a real change. I mean, this was a franchise which was essentially dead on its feet after 1997. It nearly scuppered the whole superhero comic book movie genre in itself. Batman and Robin did, but it made small headway. You had X-Men in 2000, Spider-Man in 2002, and then they decided to reboot the Batman franchise, and they gave it to Christopher Nolan, who again at that time you know, unless you'd already seen the likes of Insomnia and Memento and were familiar with him, he was probably pretty much an unknown at that time. So it was, I just loved the way that it was all completely set in like the real world. So there was scientific explanations for all the toys, all the gadgets and stuff like that. And, you know, there was no superpowers because Batman really isn't a superhero in the traditional sense. He doesn't have superpowers. He just got a supersized bank balance. That's it. And for me, it was just a really good take on it, and I really liked it, and I was excited to see what they were going to do next, especially after the tease with the Joker playing card at the end of the first one. I was just really excited to see what was going to happen. But I mean, since I worked at the cinema, I got access to the posters early, and I still got the teaser poster for the Joker with a sort of "Why So Serious" written in blood and stuff, which was apparently recalled after the tragic death of Heath Ledger. So I've still got that. But yeah, no, it was just people were looking forward to it before it came out, but then of course the tragic passing of Ledger meant that, you know, it suddenly took on this whole other sort of life and became, you know, this possibly one of the most hyped films of all time. And, you know, could it possibly live up to his legacy, and also would it be able to, you know, erase the legacy of, you know, Jack Nicholson in the role as well? So I mean, what did you think?
Yeah, like I remember being really excited because I always remembered where I was and how I went to see these movies for the first time, and I always remembered vividly, like I finished school on a Friday afternoon, and I took the train from like Huntly to Aberdeen for after school, which is like a good maybe like hour and a bit on a train all the way to Aberdeen. Went to see the film, and then I had like the train service back north wasn't the most frequent in the world, so to wait like 2 hours after the film to go home. And I always just remembered that and just like thinking about that movie, and it was such an enjoyable movie. It was so great, and that cliffhanger at the end when the Joker card's revealed, and it's like it all just starts going round in your head, like what's a Joker going to look like in this world, like how can they top the Jack Nicholson, you know, role, like all these things just naturally swivel around your head, and you just become excited. You're like, well, it feels like it's a given that there's going to be this second movie, and then when everything started to get announced that, you know, Nolan would return, and then Aaron Eckhart, who I think had not long just starred in what's it called at the time? Thank You for Smoking. Like, I thought, oh, he's going to be brilliant casting. He is a great Harvey Dent. I mean, if anyone's not seen Thank You for Smoking, you know, he plays a PR guy for a cigarette company, so he's got that kind of politician style nailed down. And then just like when Heath Ledger been cast, as you say, he kind of come off the back of Brokeback Mountain. So immediately I was thinking, yeah, of course he's going to do a great role. I couldn't quite picture how it would be, but like, this is a great actor. I completely trust it. And then obviously the trailers started to come out, the viral campaign. I always remembered Empire, I think it was perhaps the first image of the Joker.
Yeah, when they did it sort of like section by section, yeah, I was just thinking of that. And then they had the whole sort of I Believe in Harvey Dent sort of political campaign sort of trail sort of thing as well. So I mean, they were really on it with the viral marketing of that.
Yeah, I remember. I think there was even like one of the first pictures sort of revealing the Joker was like he was behind sort of a blurred mirror with like a knife aimed at someone or something along those lines, and it was like, oh, look at those kind of bright colours that you could see, the purples and the reds and stuff. It was really quite exciting. And then just like when the film came out, like I looked out the other day, I've still got my ticket stub from like a 10:30 in the morning screening, and you know, it was the first possible opportunity I had to go see it. Like, you know, we take it for granted now that we get these midnight releases for things like Ant-Man and, you know, Mission Impossible, Star Wars. Like, that was pretty much non-existent, maybe somewhat a little bit in London, but that was something we never ever really got here in Scotland at all. And it's crazy to think that, you know, just back as 2008, that was non-existent. If you would see The Dark Knight, yeah, you were probably just going to see it at a kind of bog standard time in the morning.
Yeah, no, I think I probably did a midnight screening, but it was one of those, I'm working in a cinema, we need to test the print in inverted commas.
Yes.
But that would have been 35mm back then. It could have been a digital print actually by that point, so we would have been waiting on the digital key unlocking, so you could start playing it from midnight to test it. And yeah, I mean, I was just completely blown away on the first screening. I think I mean, I didn't get to see it on IMAX until probably a couple of weeks later. I think I probably went down to Glasgow to see it on the IMAX then, but even then I was just still completely blown away, because it wasn't really like a Batman we'd ever seen before. Because, I mean, it starts off in daylight. That's the thing. And, I mean, I guess, thinking back on it, a lot of the Adam West Batman series took place during the day. But, I mean, the Burtons and the Schumacher ones, they were pretty much all at night. To see it start off in stark daylight with this bank robbery was just incredible, really. And it was just sort of the perfect sort of introduction to that character. And it was like, wow, they are really actually doing something really quite different with this.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of weird when, like, I was watching it again yesterday for the first time in a few months, and I think it's the same with all these movies, that you have so much hype going into it, and, like, sometimes it's difficult to sort of just relax into these movies and settle. It's like, hey, I'm just watching the new Batman movie. Like, every sort of decision straight away, you're wondering, oh, why have they done this? Why have they chosen that? And just as like those sorts of the indent start, the Cinecopy, the Warner Brothers, and you just start hearing like the music playing, like you're immediately thinking, oh, they've got a slight different colour to the Warner Brothers thing. They've got a bit of a theme playing here. Like, oh, it's kind of like smoke, like fire, kind of projecting the Batman image this time, not like bats. It's like as soon as that stuff's all going, like even before you get to the daylight, my mind's just sort of frying away thinking like, ooh, this is an interesting choice, why this, why that? And it's like, I was listening to, and I don't know if you listened to it, but I would recommend it, obviously with your projectionist background, that Mike Schindler, part of the Nerd Party, has his own other podcast called Film Damage, and it's him and another guy, and they talk about their experiences as projectionists working in the booths and everything like that. And like, they made a really good point, and I remember that coming out, you come out of that movie, and I went to see it myself, and I came out thinking, yeah, that was really good. But then it just takes that time to sort of settle in your head, and like, you know, it doesn't just become like, oh my god, that's one of the greatest movies of all time, or one of the best comic book movies of ever in my head straight away. It just takes that little bit of time to think, oh my god, I love that about that. Oh, I want to watch that again. I want to go see it in this format. I want to go see it again. Like, you want to have that conversation. You buy multiple copies of it. You buy a mask. It's all these different things that kind of grew out of that film after that original screening for me.
Yeah, no, I mean, for me, it's got one of the best sort of opening sequences of any sort of comic book movie, and for me, one of the best sort of final scenes of any comic book movie, or maybe any movie actually, with that whole sort of speech by Commissioner Gordon and the sort of the music, that Hans Zimmer score, which was, you know, the Joker's sort of score as well, the sort of the strings and sort of guitars and metal and stuff that they use is just so different. And for me, The Dark Knight was not only probably the best comic book movie ever at that point. For me, it had transcended the genre and become just a really, really great movie. And for me, I mean, I sort of almost think of it sometimes as like Heat, but with if De Niro and Pacino sort of dressed up in more, you know, clown makeup and dressed as a bat at times. You know, they're two sides of the same coin and stuff like that, as the Joker says at one point or something. And yeah, no, I mean, it's just incredible. And I mean, it still holds up, you know, after all this time. The acting is impeccable. You know, Bale doesn't, you know, get enough credit for me for what he does with those films, because essentially he probably does about 3 performances in that. He plays Bruce Wayne, he plays Batman, but he also plays the public persona of Bruce Wayne, who is essentially like Patrick Bateman Mark II, but he's just a total ass to anyone when he's in public and pretending to be, you know, the rich kid that everyone thinks that Bruce Wayne is, even though that's not really who he is as well. So, I mean, it's just fantastic, really.
Yeah, and I think, like, I'm with you on that one. Like, I think Bale doesn't get enough credit. Like, it's kind of easy to say, oh, it's Heath Ledger's movie, but, like, I always think of it as, like, that trio, you know, between Gordon, the Joker, and, you know, Bruce Wayne, and, well, I suppose kind of Harvey Dent, and then we have the Joker in the background pulling all these strings and tearing these people apart, and it's just, like, the ambition of the storytelling as well. And, you know, I think, especially sort of in the 90s, really, in those comic books, that movies we grew up on, like, it always seemed to be like the movies were about the origin of the bad guy and where he all kind of fitted in, and then sort of, you know, it changed really with sort of the Dark Knight trilogy, and then with the Marvel movies, it's very rare that you see sort of the origin of the bad guy. Like, right, he's just a normal guy that falls into something and then he becomes this and that. It's like these people are already sort of living, breathing creatures. And I just loved how iconic the decision was to give like the Joker no origin. Like, it could be anything. It could be all true. It could be none of it's true. Which one's right? Who knows? And I just thought it was just fantastic, those creative choices. And I'm with you on Heat. Like, I see that as well. And I remembered reading, and I need to dig it out. I tried to find it again today. But before Nolan makes any movie, he screens like a couple of different movies to his like crew to say, these are kind of the movies that have inspired me. This is something that's I'd like to see us kind of perhaps do something maybe in the similar vein. And I remembered Heat was one of these movies, and I'd love to do. I've always said like to folk, I'd love to do a podcast one day, and I'm sure we can maybe do it where, like, we look at the movies that Nolan screened to these cast and crew before making these films, and then talk about it, how it worked within the context of the movie and what inspired it. And I think doing like a Heat, Dark Knight one and the other couple movies that he screened could be an interesting one day.
No, absolutely, yeah. I mean, sort of with Heath and the decision to have sort of no definitive origin story, which is something that is kind of comes from the comic books and stuff. You've got all these different, over the years he's had several different ones, and the fact that they sort of play into that, and every single person he says, you want to know how I got these scars, and he sort of tells a different story to everyone, so you never know what the true one is. But I mean, I sort of just remember the first time like seeing him. I mean, technically his introduction comes at the end of the bank heist, but I mean, that moment where he just sort of walks into that room where all the mobsters are and sort of says, do you want to see a magic trick? And then just, kills the guy stone dead, and suddenly everyone's like, whoa, this is definitely different from what Jack Nicholson did. And I thought he just played every single note perfectly. And I mean, yeah, there was never going to be any other winner for the Best Supporting Actor at the Oscars that year, which I guess leads me on to the point of The Dark Knight should have been nominated. And I think the Academy realised now that it should have been, which is why ever since the year after The Dark Knight, they've expanded the category, so now up to 10 films can get nominated, because for me, it was truly the best film of that year. I think when you look at what was eventually nominated, it's like Slumdog Millionaire was the film that won that year. I think everyone sort of looking back can agree that Dark Knight is better than Slumdog Millionaire.
Yeah, it's one of these ones, like, it always ends up being the case with these films that this is the film that won that year or nominated that year, and then in reality it was like that other movie, and then history has looked on it much more favourably than many of these other movies. I mean, there was some good ones, the nominees for I suppose it would be 2009 really, wouldn't it? Because I was about to say 2008 had pretty good ones. We had There Will Be Blood was nominated, and I wouldn't cut it too much slack. But let's see what the 2009 ones was. Frost Nixon,
Milk, I think, as well, was one of them.
Yeah, Milk, The Reader. Can you remember that one?
I remember Hugh Jackman making a joke about the fact that nobody saw The Reader in his big musical introduction at the Oscars anyway.
The Curious Case of Benjamin Button and Slumdog Millionaire.
Well, I rest my case.
Yeah, exactly. So
I don't think I've
we'll
watched
talk about
any of those films in the 10 years that have passed again.
No.
But I've watched The Dark Knight.
No, I've watched
many,
Curious
many
Case
times.
and Frost Nixon, but no, not the others.
I did actually think Frost Nixon would have been on your top 5 political movies last week, actually. I had a feeling it might have been.
I do like it, but maybe I'd put that more in a journalism one, but maybe that's a spoiler for another day. With the kind of the movie and stuff is like we were kind of talking about, like, so much of it is during the daytime, and I think with this movie that you see what a beautiful city Chicago is, and I think when you compare sort of the Nolan movies to the Burton ones, is that sort of these Dark Knight movies, trilogy movies, are like, they feel really grounded in the real world. They feel like morality plays that can take place in our time, and it was that grounded in reality. And what was your thoughts on sort of seeing this city brought to life as a kind of comic book fan? Like, I know some people say that they prefer sort of the Burton world, where it is on that kind of Pinewood sound studio stage, or do you sort of prefer this sort of Chicago and then Pittsburgh version of the Gotham City?
Well, no, I think the decision to sort of film and locations such as like Chicago, Pittsburgh, and stuff is the right call for Nolan's version of the story, which is very much grounded in reality. Everything that Batman does, everything that it all makes sense and is all plausible. So therefore, it's perfectly logical. I mean, I think several scenes were filmed in London as well. That's the thing about his Gotham, is that in the third one, several scenes were shot in New York as well. So it's the quintessential sort of American city, but it's never one particular city. I think I'm sure like the original Supermans were meant to be kind of basically that Metropolis was essentially New York, and Gotham was, I think, sort of Chicago sort of thing. But then now the worlds of DC, I think is what they're calling it after Comic-Con. I think Metropolis and Gotham are now on the West Coast, sort of Los Angeles sort of style. But I think it works because they never really use any sort of mainstream like iconic buildings which you take you out of. Well, clearly not in Gotham. I must be in Chicago now, but it all feels real, and I think it's great. And I believe that you've actually been to several locations yourself, haven't you?
Yeah, I was lucky enough. I've always wanted to visit Chicago, and I went on a bit of an American tour last year. So, like my first full day in Chicago, we got up nice and early. To this day, it's the record amount of steps that my girlfriend's phone has ever recorded her doing, of nearly 50,000. We went on, kind of kicked around Chicago, and then Mike Schindler again from the network. Great shot kid. He, Chicago-based guy. And I said I always wanted to check out like the Dark Knight locations, and he said, like, as soon as you come here, hit me up, I'll take you around. And it was quite incredible to visit nearly all the locations from the Dark Knight. From the beginning scene of the bank to the street corner to where the Tumblr's kicking about, the Bat Pod, the shopping mall it all goes through. And what kind of surprised me and blew me away was how not small the city was in a negative way, but how many of the locations were only like a stone's throw from each other, that you never had to go far to be at another Dark Knight location. And I remember the first time, like we when we arrived in Chicago on the Friday, we went into the suburbs where we were staying, we crashed the night. I remember when we got off the metro on the Saturday, and it was just like immediately I looked down the street and I was like, oh my god! And my girlfriend thought I was about to be run over or something like that. But I was like, at the building from the Dark Knight where like they have the funeral procession in front of, and she's like, okay. So like that was so amazing, and to have someone like take you around, and I did the thing that I'm sure most geeks would do in their same position of like posing for photos on the street corner, or it was quiet at night so I could stand in the middle of the road where it was like the the hit me moment. And it's just things like that, like I'm preaching to the converted here, but like there's always something so amazing about being able to visit like a film location from a film, to see it with your own eyes, to go, oh my god, like this is a film I love and I'm in that spot and here it is. It's so cool.
Yeah, no, and there's nothing that takes you back down to reality quicker than when someone goes, huh, what? What is that building?
Yeah.
Oh, I have no idea what you're talking about. And you're like, oh, but this is the building from, and they're like, that's nice. Yeah, no, but it's somewhere that I'd really like to go. I mean, I've managed to do a few of the locations for the Dark Knight Rises when I've been in New York, down in the sort of financial district. So
yeah, and that's another one where it's all quite close together, isn't it?
yeah, it is. Yeah, yeah. No, you've got like the sort of City Hall and the sort of the building where Bane takes people hostage and stuff like that. It's all around the same sort of area, and then sort of the Queensborough Bridge as well. As well, but yeah, no, it's. I mean, it's 10 years on, and people are still sort of going and checking out locations and stuff like that. It's one which is, its legacy is something that will never fade away. I don't think and I think I was reading one article today or in the last couple of days talking about the sort of 10th anniversary, and that it's basically ruined Batman movies for the rest of the time. So it's like everyone thinks now that this was the only way to tell the Batman story, to be very dark and dour. I mean, there's still very funny moments in it. Michael Caine's Alfred gets a few good one-liners and stuff like that, but they seem to take that mindset into the world of DC stuff and made Batman even darker and more depressing than he was before, and it doesn't really work. Each filmmaker should be allowed to do it in a different way. Because yeah, Burton was a style of his own. Schumacher was, still kind of within that universe, but did it differently. And Nolan just did something else. And for me, it's my favorite version of incarnation of Batman. Although I will always have a soft spot for the Adam West version because I always watched it on Channel 4 growing up as well. So.
Yeah, I was the same. I used to run home from school after school to go home and watch it. I think that was maybe somewhat a bit of a blessing of the Marvel films. Obviously kicked off 10 years ago as well, and they never sort of subscribed to that sort of Christopher Nolan, darker is better, which was perfectly a good way to go for someone like Batman, whereas they've never adopted that. But so many films and franchises seem to go, right, that worked for Christopher Nolan's movie. Dark and gritty is what people want, but it's people wanted a dark and gritty Batman movie, or a movie like that based in sort of the real world. People weren't clamoring for something like that, for something like Fantastic Four and various other movies. And I feel sort of that it's taken a long time for a lot of people to sort of get over that view of the world, that this is what superhero movies or franchise movies should be like: dark, grim, and depressing. It's not always should be the case.
No, absolutely not. And I think sort of Marvel have done it well, and the fact that every sort of character has a different sort of style. And you just have to look at stuff like Thor Ragnarok or Ant-Man, which is very different from I know a lot of the people sort of say that it's one of the tropes that gets thrown out every time that someone stars in a sequel. It's oh, this one's going to be darker than the last one and whatever. And they certainly said that about all the Harry Potters and stuff like that. But it's they don't need to be. True, the audience sometimes is film geeks and comic book nerds in their sort of 30s and 40s, but they are still trying to aim them at a younger audience as well. So you can't be going really, really dark. But it's Nolan did the trilogy. For me, it was fantastic. But yeah, I think it needs to, because it's not part of the growing DC universe. It was its own separate thing, and we should just cherish that was we got that, and let's try and do something different now with it.
Yeah, and I think when some people talk about things maybe look like they could be potentially changing sort of on the DC front, but I think a lot of people used to sort of say that, well, Warner, you have to give Warner Brothers and DC huge credit for making these Dark Knight trilogy movies. This shows that they know what they're doing and they can do it. But I've never ever viewed them sort of as DC movies. Yeah, they have a DC character in the form of Batman and all the people from that playground, that sandbox. But in reality, you look at these movies and it's no, this is a Christopher Nolan movie from top to bottom. Everything is what he wants it to be. And I can't imagine sort of DC really having sort of much in the way of any input at all, personally.
No, yeah, it is a Nolan movie. And because, I'd seen Memento, I think, a few times. I don't think I'd seen Insomnia actually by the time that Batman Begins came out, but from that point on, I was I will see anything that this man makes. I think he's basically one of the best filmmakers of the last sort of 20 years, and I will be happy to see it. And he hasn't proven me wrong so far. I'm a big fan of Interstellar. I know some people are not, but for me, I thought it was great. And Dunkirk was just superb as well. And maybe his time will eventually come at the Oscars and the BAFTAs. He'll maybe get recognised finally for being, one of the great filmmakers of our time. But I know that, some people are they critical of him, or is it just critical of the fan base that seems to come with him, where there's certain, fans who believe that he can do no wrong. And I think there was certainly a certain level of the sort of toxic fandom came out, during the sort of times when people, if they dared to criticise any aspect of Christopher Nolan's films, people would just jump on them. I think it was when someone gave a negative review of The Dark Knight Rises before the fans had even seen it. They were calling for this person to be fired and stuff like that. Yeah, every movie has its flaws, the man does what he does, and he does it extremely well. And I mean, again, it's sometimes the stories maybe don't go in the way that you wanted it to. I mean, I'm sure there's probably, I mean, since this is 10 years since it came out, I'm sure we can talk about spoilers. But I mean, like the decision to sort of kill off Harvey Dent at the end, I'm sure was probably something that a lot of people didn't agree with at the time. But it made sense for that particular story. So what did you think of that particular decision?
Yeah, like I always think I always think it was like it felt like the right decision for the movie and at that time. But I think one of the frustrating things is, and I say that in just if I had to take a step back and if I was being somewhat insensitive, it's like I would love to have known what the movie that we were going to get was like. And I don't mean that as slight on The Dark Knight Rises. I think it's a fantastic film, but like, what was the movie that would have been made had Heath Ledger not been taken away from us? Like, where would they have gone? And you say this for Christopher Nolan, nothing ever leaks from that ship or thing. Like some for Marvel movies or various other franchise, whatever, we can always hear, oh, this could have been, this was it kind of happened, or there was this script that was sort of a bit like this. Like, I have no idea what would have happened next and where they would have gone. And I think that's one of the great perhaps mysteries of all time, if life had been a bit different. But I like the decisions that were made there, and I think it's such a good end to the Harvey Dent character. I'm not sure where they would have potentially gone with it afterwards, and people do say it sort of feels a bit tacked on, this Harvey Dent story. It's like it's the sort of the last third of the movie is dedicated to sort of this character, but I think it's such a good story and it tells it so well. I think his descent into madness is a little quick, but I do buy it to an extent, though I probably would have shot the Joker if I was him in his bed. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I think a lot of people sort of still going about the fact that for some reason he couldn't tell it was the Joker until he removed the face mask, even though he was wearing the nurse's outfit and stuff. But I mean, I think it maybe does feel a little quick. But I mean, there are sort of hints earlier on that he's maybe not as sort of mentally stable as he puts on. But I think, I mean, a lot of it does come from the one of the storylines about how the Joker basically tried to drive Commissioner Gordon mad over one really long bad day and stuff like that. So they basically kind of took that sort of storyline from the Killing Joke and stuff and repurposed it for the character of Harvey Dent. I think it works better for Harvey's story than it would have done with Commissioner Gordon, I think, at that point. Although Gary Oldman is just, he's one of the sort of unsung heroes throughout the whole franchise for me.
Yeah, he really does drive this movie quite a bit. Yeah,
no, I mean, he's like this. He's probably like Bruce Wayne sort of calls Harvey Dent, he's the one shining light and the one sort of true potential hero of Gotham. But I think it is actually, over the three films, it probably is Commissioner Gordon. There's that great line, either die a hero or see yourself live long enough to become the villain, and that sort of plays out across the sort of the whole sort of franchise, and it's great. And just, but I mean, it all comes from the Joker again, not to keep going back to the genius of Heath Ledger, but that performance and just how just off the wall it is, but also grounded in it. You can see what he's doing, and if you look at it, the Joker does more to clear the streets of the mob and their money and stuff than Batman actually does. Mm-hmm. He probably gets rid of more of them. It's actually him that almost cleans up Gotham, and and a lot of people have I know in the past have been critical of his plan at the end with the two ferries and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. I still believe that how basically they say you've got to blow up the other ferry to live. I think if someone had pushed the button, it would have blown up their own ship, and the other ship would have been blamed for it anyway. So I think that's what, because I thought the Joker's always got a plan B, and I think that's what his plan was eventually, that you can blow up the criminals, but actually you would have ended up killing yourselves, but the criminals would have been blamed anyway. So That was my point.
Yeah.
Did you ever think that, or is that just me?
Yeah, I always thought it was just
spitballing
that
a theory.
I always just thought it was just like one step, just a little too far in terms of the story. Like you almost, I believe everything. Like this could all happen, and then it just that one goes. It just feels like that one little scheme, just a bit too far. But I think with that kind of movie, you're so gripped by it anyway. It's like, oh yeah, let it pass. And I like the kind of morality of it all. That is it just in the grand scheme of things, we talk about these Christopher Nolan movies are so intellectual, and you have to have a degree to understand them. But sometimes in the best way, like they are quite simple stories. At the end of the day, it's like. Even the some bad people are not beyond redemption, and sometimes the people that we put our faith in are the people that perhaps might let us down, and it's just a simple kind of thing that's sort of proven itself in that third act. And I enjoy it. It's I don't have the issues with the boat thing as much as many others do.
Thinking about it, sort of when we were talking about where the story could have gone, I always thought there was more in the sort of storyline, with the lawyer who digs up the true identity of, because his name is, I think they call him Reese, so his name would have been Mr. Reese, as in Mr. Reese, and I always thought that was a potential setup for him becoming the Riddler in the next film.
Interesting.
And the Riddler is the one person who knows the Batman's true identity. So I always thought that was potentially where that was going to go, but I guess no, we never did see that again. But they probably would have wanted maybe Warner Brothers would have wanted a bigger name if they ever did cast the Riddler, because I think the Riddler is a character that could have worked really well actually in Nolan's universe. It's sort of like a serial killer using like Saw type games and puzzles to basically make Batman run around town trying to save people and stuff like that. I think it could have been if they wanted to go like really sort of 7 levels of dark, it could have worked, but again, it's something that we won't see. But that was just my thought.
I think with one thing I always think of with the sort of the Dark Knight is that we talk about how Nolan revolutionized this, or people took from that. Like, I think one of the biggest things for me is like he made IMAX really what it was. That we had a few filmmakers that had skirted around it. I know George Lucas had done some bits and pieces and for IMAX with some of the Star Wars prequels, but like Nolan was probably the first like truly embrace it and use it. And people talk about 3D with Cameron, but like what Nolan has done with IMAX has been truly incredible. And I think that we owe so much of the IMAX that we know and see today, and I consider it one of the best formats to see a film is down to Nolan and him showing with The Dark Knight how it can be best used. Oh no, absolutely. I mean, yeah, it works so well that I don't even really notice when, because I've got on my Blu-ray it switches aspect ratios on my telly when it does, but you don't even really notice. That's how good and subtle it is in the way it works. I mean, obviously, I'm sure you would notice a lot more on the IMAX screen, because it uses the sort of full screen, and there's several sequences such as the opening, and then that amazing sort of practical effect where they flip the 18-wheeler truck. And I read the other day that at that point there was 4 IMAX cameras in the world, and following that stunt there were 3 for a while because one got crushed underneath. But yeah, he uses IMAX in such a way that it enhances the story. I mean, I once saw an IMAX screening of, no, it wasn't an IMAX, but it was shot for IMAX. It was one of the Transformer films, and it changed ratio almost every 3 seconds or something. It was so disturbing to watch with your eyes, but he uses it for certain sequences which need it, and he would do that again in the follow-up with the Bane plane sequence and so many other things. But this time it was like, it really works. And yeah, I mean, he's done it ever since with Interstellar, Dunkirk. He uses IMAX and makes it use it to the best of its abilities to show you what cinema can really do. And he uses that and 70mm and stuff. He's still passionate about the movie going and the cinema going experience, and his movies absolutely 100% should always be seen on the big screen and on the largest screen that you possibly can find as well. Absolutely, and yeah, he makes it kind of such a truly special experience. And I think one of these things that we've kind of touched upon almost a few times in our conversation is how quotable this movie is, and how much iconography is in this movie. I couldn't help but chuckle the other day. I think you posted some pictures of celebrating the anniversary of this movie, and there you are dressed as the Joker, dressed as a nurse, and it's an outfit that I've also worn. I've done that one as well. What are some of your favourite kind of lines, images from this movie that have made this film as incredible as it is with the general audiences, that it seems to have really resonated in ways that films can only dream of sometimes?
Oh, in terms of moments and stuff, there's How About a Magic Trick, and then there's that moment where Heath Ledger is walking out of the hospital, and still to this day there's debate over whether or not there was meant to be a delay in the explosion, but the way that he covers it up by just sort of going, what? Sort of shrugs and stuff and starts playing with the detonator before it blows off. That is the sort of level of commitment to the character, and yeah, it's just one of those films which stays with you. And yeah, I've done a few Dark Knight trilogy triple bills at the cinema, and sort of involved sort of dressing up, and there's certain lines in cinema that stick with you, and you end up using them in certain ways. So it's like, if basically when I introduced one of them, I was going to say, "Evening, ladies and gentlemen, we are tonight's entertainment," and stuff, and like, you just end up using them in your mind. You're saying it the way that they are as well. And yeah, I dressed up as the Joker for that. Started off in the first outfit, included the mask as well, which freaks people out when you don't talk to them, but just wear that mask. It really does. And then halfway through, I changed into the nurse's outfit as well. And, we did sort of promotional shots for the trilogy up on the roof with a guy dressed as Batman as well and stuff. So it's one which, we basically had a sellout screening for those, and it was just so much fun to do. You could see that people really did and truly loved the show, and that was probably 4-5 years after The Dark Knight came out, and people still came to see all three back to back. They spent about probably 10, 11 hours in the screen, and they just loved every single minute of it. And yeah, for me, it still remains probably I'd say the best comic book movie for me. What about yourself?
Yeah, I went to that triple bill up in Aberdeen. That obviously I live in Edinburgh, but I remember I'd seen like the triple bill, like, I think I've done it 3-4 times at cinemas. They did it like once here for The Dark Knight Rises, and I'd seen like a double bill a couple of times before then. And then there was a triple bill like a month or so later. Was like, hey, for those people that couldn't make it during the night, here it is during the daytime. And I remember when it was announced up in Aberdeen, and sometimes I just look for an excuse to go up and visit my family, and I was like, a Dark Knight triple bill. So I took my girlfriend at the time. We went up to Aberdeen for that. So we travelled like 200 odd miles or whatever it was just to go see the Dark Knight movies again. Because it's always one of these things. Sometimes I think as a geek or whatever, like, you're chasing sort of that Star Wars experience in a way that when you're growing up, you see what it was like in the 70s, people queued around the corner, or these late night movie marathons or events, and you think, oh man, I wish we got that in the UK. It used to be a thing I would think of, that was a thing that happened in the past. And sort of in the past few years with things like the Prince Charles and things like the Bellment cameo, etc., like these opportunities are there where you get that nerd and geek experience. And sometimes, even if I've done it once, I sometimes want to go back to that well again. And even though I've seen these films multiple times, like I could watch them anytime I wanted on my TV, with HD, etc. But like sometimes you just want to go watch it in the cinema, like have that experience. Like this is our generation's sort of Star Wars in a way. I think like when I think of like the big movies that perhaps came out of in our time, perhaps, and I think of something like Jurassic Park, Star Wars Episode 1, and then sort of The Dark Knight. I think those would be like the three biggest kind of cultural changing or biggest film events maybe of the time. Maybe I'm doing a disservice by maybe missing one or two there, but I think those three would certainly top many lists.
Yeah, no, I would agree with you. I remember, the reason sort of we tried to put so much effort into having all the sort of staff dressed up at the triple bill and sort of doing quizzes and stuff in the middle of it was because we wanted to make an experience that you would not be able to get at home. Anyone can just stick on Netflix these days, or get the DVDs and put on 3 films back to back, but it was to make it a reason to come and see these films as they were meant to be seen in the cinema. But I think for me growing up, Star Wars was the one. I was born in 1980 and sort of had it taped off the telly and basically watched it every single weekend, and then went to the Odeon in 1997 when the special editions were re-released, and that was back then when, there was only, you could only watch it in one screen, and therefore you were actually queued around the block waiting to get in and stuff like this. But I think you're absolutely right. Sort of Jurassic Park sort of changed things back in '93, and then I'd say comic book movies these days are the sort of this generation's sort of Star Wars and stuff like that, and the sort of storytelling over multiple films and stuff like that. Although Marvel, are doing it in a way that is completely different to what you could do with Star Wars and whatever back then, and just because they have such a wealth of material to use and things like that. But there's something that all of these sort of films, Star Wars, Jurassic Park, these comic movies, they speak to the inner child in you, I guess, because when you're a kid you love dinosaurs and stuff like that, and then in 1993 a film comes out and you get to see dinosaurs almost like for the first time on the big screen. And then similar with like Batman and the Spider-Man and stuff, you're getting to see the characters that you used to read as a kid, and you're now getting to see them on the big screen, and that's a huge deal for someone like me. Some people may not really understand, but for me to see that sort of things big up on the big screen is just fantastic. And as long as the stories are done well and enjoyable, then of course it's going to be fantastic. And it's escapism for a couple of hours. God knows sometimes we probably need it at the moment with everything that's going on. You just want to just escape into another world and just enjoy it, and that's what these movies provide, I think.
Yeah, and I think it's one of these things like, if you make these movies for us, if you make them good, you respect the audience, then like people will be loyal in a good way, not in a sycophantic way, but like as you say, like if people put on events and like it makes it all the worthwhile, like people will go because they know it's going to be an experience. And like the same with Nolan movies, like in IMAX or 70mm, like it's a new Christopher Nolan movie, not many people need to be told like, it's going to be another film or whatever it's all about. It's just like it's another one of films, like we should go and it'll be experience. And I think like the Dark Knight trilogy just earns so much goodwill and respect, and I think like they're movies that truly will stand the test of time, and I think that's its legacy, that people are still enjoying these movies. And I think, I can't remember who it was, someone the other day put up a droll tweet that I thought was quite funny. It was like, everyone's celebrating the 10th anniversary of the Dark Knight. Well, I think film fans have been celebrating it for every single bloody day since the movie came out, and it's very rare that in this kind of divisive times of movies and debate and moaning and bitching and tweeting, that people can just, for the most part, genuinely love this movie. I know it has its detractors, and I think some are being a bit obtuse, but I think this film unified film fans in ways that not many superhero movies or blockbuster movies will have ever done since.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a film that going into it had a huge amount of hype. Could it possibly live up to it? Yes, it did. Yeah, hand on heart, it is not a perfect film. I mean, you could say that the female characters are underserved, as that seems to be a criticism of across many sort of Christopher Nolan films. But I mean, I thought Maggie Gyllenhaal was better than Katie Holmes, so I mean, and still in some ways that's an improvement. I mean, she may get fridged just to advance the emotional arcs of two of the main characters, but still. And for me, perhaps just the high and the feelings that people had for The Dark Knight is maybe The Dark Knight Rises could never live up to that. But for me, I thought it just rounded out the trilogy in such a beautiful way. Again, spoilers, but I mean, I'm sure you've probably seen The Dark Knight Rises, anyone who's listening, if you're listening to a film about The Dark Knight. When Marion Cotillard stabs Bruce Wayne, as Batman at the end, I thought, holy shit, they're actually going to kill off Batman at this. This is going to be a definitive end here. And I was like nearly in tears. I don't cry at movies, but I was nearly welling up at this point, going, one, for, oh my God, I can't believe they're going to kill Bruce Wayne. And then second, part of my head was thinking, comic book movies are never going to be this good again. I mean, the Marvel Universe has gone on and become its own thing, and I think they are doing a superb job. I think the Nolan trilogy itself is something special that might never be topped, although I'm now starting to think that there might be a contender on the rise, given a trailer that I saw coming out of Comic-Con. I mean, I would never have probably said it 10 years ago, but an M. Night Shyamalan superhero movie about comic books, yeah, that could be a genuinely genius thing. I don't know if you feel the same, but
yeah, I think it could be an interesting. I'm very much looking forward to that. We'll definitely have to do an episode on that one for sure. The M. Night Shyamalan universe as well. But yeah, I think there'll be no movie ever probably like the Dark Knight Rises, Dark Knight or trilogy ever like that again. And I hope in 10 years, I suspect in 10 years time we'll still be talking about it. And it blows my mind thinking like I was 21 when I watched that movie, and that there's people that I probably know and I do some work with that never saw that movie in the big screen, and it's like that's how far time's gone, and like that kind of blows my mind a little bit.
I know I'm surprised. I mean, I guess 10 years isn't enough these days. I know that Big Lebowski's getting a 20-year anniversary re-release, and you get a few 30-year anniversary re-releases. 10 years is apparently not enough, although I think, was it 4 lucky cities in the US are getting an IMAX 70mm print screening of The Dark Knight. Was it last week or this week? But that was it. That was all that they were getting because there's so few of the prints still remaining. But I mean, yeah, I mean, it's probably one of those films that, I mean, there's certain films that if they're ever on the big screen, I go and see them just for the experience. And I think The Dark Knight is certainly one of those ones which would always stand up on a repeat viewing on the big screen as well.
Absolutely. So yeah, it's been such a blast kind of talking about The Dark Knight today, and on its 10th anniversary of all days as well, and stuff like that. So yeah, thank you very much for joining me, Dallas. Like obviously we mentioned that like you've kind of your experience with like film locations, and particularly New York where some of The Dark Knight Rises was filmed. If people wanted to kind of find your book and check out those locations, I know my friend has recently bought your book and will be checking out some of those locations. Where can other people buy your book and find about it online?
Well, the book's called Exterior New York City, Discover the Real New York on Location, and it's available Amazon.com or Amazon.co.uk. If you just type in Exterior New York City and Dallas King, you'll be able to find it. It's got about 100 film locations all across New York, and hopefully your friend will find it very useful. And I know FEO Schwartz is shut now, but the rest of the locations should still be valid, I think.
Absolutely, it's a great book, and I remember ages ago before we're on at like episode 125, and I think you came on episode 69, and I remember like my original idea for an episode with you was like, oh, I should get you on, like I'd love to talk about your book and film locations and stuff like that. Like that was episode 69, we never did it then, and here we are 125 episodes in, we still haven't done that. But one day we've got to do an episode where we treat you like an interview guest, get you on to talk about your book and projects and things like that. We've definitely got to get that in the books once we've probably got through this summer movie season that's about to kind of ramp up in the next few weeks.
Absolutely. Well, once a film that comes out this year that's set in New York, then we can do a New York special. So
there we go.
Yeah.
We're all sorted. So thank you very much for joining me today. If anyone else wanted to kind of find you online, read your reviews, where could kind of people find you?
They can find me on Twitter at champcelluloid, and my blog with all my reviews on it is championshipcelluloid.blogspot.com.
And you can find me on Twitter at Lee_Nostromo. So thank you very much for joining us today, and happy birthday to The Dark Knight. Goodbye.
Join the revolution. Join the Nerd Party.
Welcome to Nerd